This episode of the TWC MMA podcast is brought to you by View Energy. Life is better with a view.
Ads, you are just killing it out here. For those of you who don't know who Ads is, he is the AI voice at the TWC that tries to sell you stuff, but he has a proprietary algorithm that picks and chooses only quality brands that he will put in front of you. He's got a really strong ad blocker. Unfortunately, TWC fight nights get a little glitchy for us because the system usually ends up having some hard drive issues and he glitches out, and you have to come to TWC 101.5 or you need to tune in on the pay-per-view to see what happens when ad blocker gets attacked by a malware. So shout out to my guys Michael and Gordy over at View. They are some of the founders over there, and Kenton, the CEO. These guys are incredible. Just got off a call with them today with some other partners of mine, and the other partners told us that they have a no asshole policy, and I love that. Like, we do not partner with a-holes, and I have fully adopted that policy at the TWC, and we might even write it into our bylaws as a business. But yeah, View Energy is incredible. It's been so much fun to just brainstorm things with them, like different marketing campaigns that we're going to put together, like potentially TWC MMA branded bottles with like fighter signatures on the caps. We've got so much cool stuff coming down the pipeline with View, and I just want Michigan to understand, and the Michigan MMA community in general, like, to understand these guys are family now. So big warm welcome to the Gronkowski brothers and the Gronkowski family. Sorry, whether or not you want to be, you're now a part of the TWC fam. So are you, Michael and Kenton. I think everyone needs to go to viewdrink.com to order because they aren't distributed in Michigan yet, but that is what our job is, guys. That's our job, is to bring the brand awareness to the state so that they can expand there. And basically what I love about View, and you can find them at viewdrink on Instagram, is that they're not just a healthy, beverage or like an energy drink that's not gonna give you a heart attack. They are a business that is a part of a larger portfolio of just healthcare brands and wellness brands that are committed to preventative wellness. And their beverages and their powder packs and their vitamin teas are natural, non-GMO, vegan ingredients, no added sugar, and they come in 100% recyclable packaging. They're basically creating their own manufacturing plant so that they can commit to full sustainability in their packaging, which is so cool. And a couple of weeks ago when I met with the guys and I was talking about committing to them as a partner and sponsor, they gave me some samples, and I stopped my coffee for 7 days, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to get behind this, it actually has to work. And I literally now, like, I pull it up on every Zoom call that I have with these guys. I have the box. I'm going through my second one now. I have the box of like the powder packs, and I just throw it in my water bottle throughout the day while I'm working, and it actually did make a difference. Like, I can feel it, and I'll be bringing a bunch of powder packets to the coaches that I'm going to be visiting in Michigan this upcoming week. SFS, Warrior Way, Murcielagos Gym, and who else am I? American Top Team. So I will be passing those out, and I want everyone to know that we are going to do some really fun stuff at the fight about View. There's going to be some cool stuff incorporated into the show, and I'm really excited about it. So yes, go follow them on Instagram, go to their website, order some powder packets or some beverages. I think they're running a 50% off. Oh no, I think that's gone now, but they were running a sale. So we'll see if we can get a coupon code for y'all for that fight coming up. And yeah, there's a lot coming down the pipeline for them. I might even have them on as guests for the podcast. So thank you very much for tuning in. And without further ado, this episode of TWC MMA podcast.
Hey everyone, we're back with another TWC podcast. Today we have our Chief Project Manager Brandon with us again, as always, and we have Alibeth Milliron. Right? Hopefully that was good. I pronounced that okay. So she's going to be fighting on her next card, TWC 101.5, on May 13th. And yeah, we're just going to have her on and ask her a few things, get her background. It's her first time fighting for the TWC, so we're just going to try to learn as much as we can about her, so you guys can get pumped up and excited when you see her on May 13th. Cool. So I'd just like to start it with introducing yourself and just giving us like your background and eventually how it even led you to the TWC, because like I said, it's your first time fighting for us.
Yeah. So my background in martial arts kind of starts early on. I started Taekwondo as a kid, transitioned from kickboxing to kickboxing when I was like 16, 17. Just did a little bit of training in that. And then ultimately my Taekwondo instructor told me, he's like, I just think that your style of how you like to compete would just be better for MMA. And I was like, oh, what's MMA? And I didn't know what the UFC was. I didn't know anything about MMA. He's like, well, come to a 2-hour, come to this MMA class. And I did, went to a 2-hour MMA class and, loved it, thought it was fun. And he's like, well, there's an event, there's an MMA fights going on in Alpena, Michigan, next weekend. Just show up. There's a girl that's been looking for a fight. You're close to the same weight, to work out. I'm like, okay, yeah, sounds good. And I had just turned 18 a couple months before, so I didn't need a parent to sign a waiver or anything. Showed up for that first fight, and I loved it. I did not win that fight, but it was a lot of fun, and that kind of started my amateur career. And so I've been fighting for about 14 years now, on and off. I do have a family, so I've taken time off to have my 3 kids. But yeah, I turned pro in 2018, was able to have 2 pro fights, one of them in Michigan and one of them in New York, won both by knockout. Was on a good momentum, good first way to start out those first pro fights. And then I tore my ACL about 4 or 5 months later, pretty devastating injury. Anyone that knows much about ACL tears, it was a complete tear, also just destroyed the meniscus, all the cartilage in there. And so had to have surgery, and took about a year off to get that rehab, did all the PT, just wanted to make sure I did everything right with that, and was able to come back. About a year later, I was able to get back in the gym and felt great. And honestly, that surgery went really well. Everything went really good. And then COVID hit, right? So, by the time I was getting back in the gym, COVID hit. And of course, we have this huge lull in the whole MMA world where nothing is going on essentially. So that was frustrating just because, you want to just get back in there and get back after it, especially when you've had a layoff from an injury. I was able to get a fight in Maine, in Portland, Maine, it was February 22. And, lost that one. A really tough girl, Glory Watson, who is a savage. Anyone in the MMA scene on the East Coast knows that she's a destroyer. And really good fight. Felt really good in that fight. Really good comeback, I think, and I kind of restored my confidence in like, okay, I can move, I can still do what I need to do, especially with coming off of injury. And I have fought twice more since then. I fought for Combat Global down in Miami, and then I've also most recently fought for Ohio Combat League out of Columbus, and that was just this past January. And I'm excited about this fight with TWC. Obviously the TWC promotion's been around for a long time. I've followed a lot of the TWC fights. They've always been good about putting girl fights together. So of course, being a female MMA fighter, I've always followed the promotion and kind of watched the matchups they've made. And of course, my opponent, being from Michigan as well, I think this is kind of an inevitable that we'd have a run in, and I love that it's coming together at this time for TWC. I'm pretty pumped for this May 13th event.
I understand that you're friends with her.
Yeah, so we trained together. There was a great like all girls training seminar kind of thing that was like a week long, out of her former gym SFS. And great experience. Tabitha's a great girl. And that's the thing, is I'm not one of those people that has to pretend like they have a problem with their opponents. Most of the girls that I fought, I am, at least follow them on social media, and I'd like to think, would be friends with or train with again. She's a great girl. She's super talented. She's got a lot going her way. And like I said, it's always funny when people are like, well, what do you have? Do you have anything to say about them? I'm like, no, no. Anyone that's competed very long in this sport knows that there's really shouldn't be anything personal behind any of this. This is a sport, and you know what? We don't get to get in that cage unless we have an opponent standing across from us. So I'm always super grateful when matchups happen, and especially being a female in this sport, you realize that it's hard to find female matchups. It's hard to find someone in your same weight class, anywhere near your same experience level, any of that. It's really hard, and I don't take that for granted because for years, you'd show up at regional, local MMA events like, can I get a fight? Is anyone within 30 pounds of me? That was the Wild West days of MMA in Michigan. You just showed up hoping you'd find a fight. And so I don't take that for granted. I'm super grateful when matchups like this can be made.
There was a time where I trained with another gym across town, and we were talking about the tournament that was coming up. There was a tournament in a couple of months, and there was this guy, real tall, real thin, and he said, "Oh, I'm gonna fight at 170." I was like, "You weigh 170 right now, right?" He's like, "Yeah." And I told him, and at that time I was walking around at about 200 pounds, and I said, "I'm dropping down to 170." So I'm like, we might match up against each other. I'm like, and I'm dropping weight, so I don't think that's a really good idea, man. I think you should probably look at least dropping one weight class.
Right.
But it's very interesting when you are around the community enough. You start following people that you're like, I might have to fight this person, and you have to keep that in mind.
Yep.
I really like their style. At least I can follow them and see what they're working on. But I might have to fight this person, and that's happened a lot. And heck, even if you have aspirations to go any bigger, you're starting to follow people that you're a fan of, and like, I might have to fight this person I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it. You came back around. So I was looking at the timeline. As soon as you're ready to fight, COVID hits.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as you're ready to fight, COVID hits, and it's granted, COVID stopped the whole world. Everything slowed down for at least a year to two. How did you're coming off of an injury, you're coming off of the momentum swing, all of that. For some people, it was mentally devastating. I couldn't go out and train anymore, so I got fat. But when you're competing at that point, how do you keep yourself mentally ready for, like, hey, if this COVID stuff stops in 2 months, I can be ready to go? What were you doing in the household, or were you just going stir crazy?
It was rough, but it was rough for all of us, right? It wasn't just me. Like we all dealt with that up and down of how long is this going to be? How long do I need to wait? And yeah, I was super motivated. I just wanted to get back in the gym, and of course, right as I got back in the gym, you're out. No, everyone's on a shelf. Fortunately for me, my husband was a pro fighter as well. He trains jiu-jitsu. So, I had a little more of an outlet than maybe most people did. I was able to train at home. I was able to do some stuff at home. Is it the same as being back in the gym? No. But I was so excited to get back to normal and get myself back in shape and get a fight booked that it did keep me motivated enough to be like, okay, it's 6 p.m. We're training. I was able to stay fairly motivated, but it was rough. I mean, yeah, it's hard, and especially coming back from an injury because you have a lot of doubt. Like, will I be the same?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. With one thing that impressed me is that you have a lot of amateur fights. You had 9 amateur fights, I can see.
My amateur record was 9-4, so I had 13 amateur fights.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it, do you think, for especially those people listening in, because some people are fans of MMA, but they don't understand how important it is to have amateur fights. There are fighters that will have 2 or 3 fights and then go pro. And I think as a fighter, we say, like, that's pretty dangerous because you haven't developed to that degree yet. But I want to hear from you, like, how important do you think it is for somebody to get that seasoning while they're an amateur, while they're training?
I think it's crucial. Like if you really want to take it seriously and you really want to turn pro and try to make it anywhere, it's crucial to get those amateur fights in, because even if you had a great base, from childhood in jiu-jitsu or wrestling or boxing, any of these things, even if you have a really well-rounded set of tools, you still need to see certain opponents. You need to see a good wrestler. You need to see a good striker. You need to see a good jiu-jitsu player. You need to see all those opponents before you go pro, because you're going to find those. I mean, in the pros, they're not just going to be one thing. They're going to be a blended. They're going to be a mishmash of really good skill sets. And you need to see early on, amateur, you need to fight those people and find ways to overcome those skill sets, because if you don't, you turn pro and you just kind of you'll get steamrolled, you know. And I'm not saying that people can't learn as they fight those first 5 to 10 professional fights. Sure, you can learn, but it's a rough way to go. It's a harder way to go than if you'd gotten that timing on the amateur level.
Oh,
And then
for sure.
I know you jumped around with your weight classes too in your amateur days. So I mean, were you still trying to figure out what weight was best and most comfortable for you? And I mean, I know you've been fighting at straw weight. So is that kind of like where you found your groove?
Yes. So originally, and going back to like early days of MMA for Michigan, no sanctioning, there was no state involvement. You would just show up at events and kind of hope that you had a fight. And I fought girls that were anywhere from 30 pounds to 40 pounds heavier than me, because there wasn't state sanctioning. You know, it didn't really matter. If you both agreed to fight, you could fight. So originally I didn't cut weight. So for, the first 5 or 6 years of me fighting, I never cut weight. So I just show up and weigh in. And if you're close enough, then you're good to go, or even if you weren't close enough, you just weighed in. So I did not actually make my first actual weight cut until 2017. And it was a 115 fight. And when I say first real weight cut, I just didn't eat breakfast that morning and sweat a little bit before I went to weigh in. So even that wasn't my first real weight cut, but I was like, okay, I need to make sure I make weight at 115. My first real weight cut was up to 105, where I actually did a water load, a water dump, kind of did all the things that you need to do with a real weight cut. And I fought at 105 several times, I think 3 times in total. And just the last time, it just seemed to get harder and harder. The first time was okay. Second time, The third time was miserable. And maybe part of that was I was traveling. I had to fight out in Reno. And it just, between the traveling and just, not knowing where a sauna was, or, what I mean, finding your acute weight loss tools, like a good sauna or a good bathtub, it was miserable. And I was like, I'm not doing this again because I love fighting and I don't want to dread fighting because of a weight cut. And obviously, I believe that as you age, especially, you need to take care of your body. And extreme weight cutting is super dangerous, as everybody knows that's looked into it. So no, I don't feel like cutting 15 pounds or 15, 20 pounds to make atom weight. And straw weight was a comfortable weight where I can cut out my sugar and my snacks and do a little weight cut and be just fine. So that was the weight I settled at.
Yeah, you hear that a lot with fighters as they get older, and I'm like, the more times they cut, it just starts getting like unbearable. And like you said, it's not healthy for your body either.
No.
It causes like long-term damage and stuff. So, I totally get that.
And trying to cut weight in Reno's higher elevation too, that makes it a little bit harder because you can't just go on the treadmill and you're already low energy. It's that's a nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
It's really funny thinking of like the pre-sanctioning days in Michigan. That was like a slightly regulated bar fight is what it sounds like.
Very, very much so. And oddly enough, most of them were in bars and nightclubs and those kind of venues. So that was fitting. But yeah, essentially anyone could open a promotion and put on an event, and there were not too many guidelines for what you had to do, which in a way, people reminisce about those days because obviously there was a lot more activity. There were fights any weekend in Michigan. You could travel to any, town, city in Michigan and there'd be a fight on. But on the other hand, now with actual sanctioning and legislation behind it, you have people that take it much more seriously than they ever did in the Wild West.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So you really got to see the whole transformation of the Michigan MMA scene.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, especially for women's MMA, because back in 2008, women fighting were limited anyways. Anywhere, across the country, there weren't very many women doing MMA. But in Michigan, I mean, I think my MMA fight in Michigan, in northern Michigan, was probably the very first MMA fights for like a female match fight in northern Michigan. Because women were not, and MMA just wasn't big yet. It is, it's blowing up so much in the last 10, 12 years. I mean, it's like I said, I had my first MMA fight and I'd never seen an MMA fight, either live or on TV. I didn't even know what the UFC was. So, you know, it's a different world now, but
It's crazy.
Now,
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask what your aspirations are. Like, are we looking to get as many fights as a pro, just on any league? Are you looking to make it to the UFC? Do you want to essentially open your gym at some point? Like, what do you want your fight career to take you? I mean, or is it just something that you can look back at later on and say, you know what, I was a pro fighter. I mean, everyone has different goals and what they want to achieve.
yeah. And I would say it's a combination of all those things a little bit for me. I love martial arts. I've trained some form of martial arts since I was a child, and I can see myself being 70 years old as long as I'm not too broken and training, you know, in some capacity, whether it's just jujitsu or whatever, you know. So I love martial arts. I will continue to train and compete in some form of martial arts for the rest of my life as long as I'm physically able to. So that will always be in my life, no matter what, because I love it. As far as like MMA fighting, I love to fight. There's something you can't even describe, like the feel. There's a special feeling with fighting that I haven't been able to get with jiu-jitsu tournaments. I haven't gotten it with kickboxing. You know, I didn't get it anywhere else, and so I want to keep fighting. You know, as long as I'm able. And the goal short term, I was signed with Invicta FC, and they were kind of going through a lull of some transitionary stuff with their broadcasting platforms and whatnot, and I wasn't able to get a fight with them. And I'm hoping, you know, like short-term goals, I'm really hoping to be able to get a fight with them. You know, I had an offer to fight for Bellator just over a year ago, and the timing was bad, and it was a weight class up, so not my weight class, so it didn't work out. But things like that definitely those are my goals, definitely in the short term. And you know, we'll see where this path takes me, because fighting is a wild ride. But yeah, I love it. So you know, in the meantime, I just keep training and taking fights and seeing where it takes me.
So no signs of slowing down.
No, no.
And I know you mentioned you have a family. So how does that work? How does your training affect your family life? I know you have a husband. You, like I said, you have a family. So how's that working?
It's how I'm constantly juggling all of it. It's, you know, life is about balance, and you know, MMA has always taken up, or mixed martial arts in general have taken up a big chunk of my life always. And when I had my kids, you know, you just kind of just pile your plate a little higher. My kids grew up in the gym with me. I mean, they literally, oh, my poor kids, they'd be strapped in car seats lined up, you know, as I'm training and whatnot. You know, that was like their life. And now that they're older, of course, they've got their own things going on. They train jiu-jitsu, they do wrestling, they do all that too. So it's kind of a bit of a family thing now, which is kind of nice because it's more inclusive. You know, my husband, you know, he still does jiu-jitsu. It's kind of I like it because last year we all went to a jiu-jitsu tournament together, so we all competed, you know, at a jiu-jitsu tournament, and all brought home, you know, some good bling. So it was a good day. But stuff like that makes it fun, and I like it because as they're getting older, it's a little more inclusive, where it's not just about me being gone at the gym. Although there's plenty of that too. So it's a balancing act. You know, I'm also I have my own massage studio. I'm a massage therapist, and I have my own business. So I juggle, you know, that with kids and their schedule. My husband has his own building, you know, construction company, so that's on the side. It's chaos around here, but we do try to balance everything as much as possible.
Did they go to the fights?
They've been to some of them. You know, I haven't been able to fight in Michigan in a very long time. So all these ones, you know, Florida, New York, Maine, you know, Reno, all these places, no, like I'm not hauling 3 children under the age of like, you know, 10 with me to these things and cutting weight and dealing with all that. So I haven't done it when I travel, but they were at my last fight in Michigan, they were able to be at, and we're going to see with this one whether they'll be able to be at it or not.
It seems like a good business model. Hurt people in the gym and then massage it out later.
Yeah. Yes.
That's funny. I was just going to ask you, like, how do you see like women's MMA? I know you said like back in the day there weren't many fights with women in it. I mean, you've pretty much seen the entire history, right, of like women in combat sports kind of progressing to the main stage. Where do you see that going? I mean, do you think you're a part of that? Obviously, like, have you played a role in that at all?
I hope so. And, you know, regionally, I like to think that, yeah, you know, like I think that it's like a, it's a trickle effect, right? The more women that are in gyms together, that are, that other women see fighting, and it builds momentum. It brings more women into the sport. The more visibility that women have in this sport, and I think even just, in Michigan, the more people see that, the more people like, oh, I want to try that. Oh, that girl does this. Man, I could do that too. And they go join a gym, and then, it's a trickle effect, and you get more and more women in these gyms doing jiu-jitsu, MMA, and that's how you build. That's why the UFC has talent now. 5 years ago, you look at where these divisions were to where they are now, it's because, you get these competitive people when you have more numbers. At first you just had like your handful of people, and usually they were specialists. There's a good wrestler, there's a good, jiu-jitsu player, there's, what I mean, you have like your specialists, and now you don't hardly see specialists anymore, because you have girls that are growing up in gyms doing mixed martial arts, and it's super exciting, because that wasn't a thing even 10 years ago. That was not even a thing, even 5 years ago. And I think it's really exciting to see like the young breed of like female MMA fighters right now, like 18, 20, early 20s. I mean, it's scary, because they grew up literally doing MMA, and nobody else did that. When you transition to these sports, you wrestled, or you did jiu-jitsu, or you did boxing. So I think it's amazing. I love watching it, because it seems like it's gaining momentum, and we're going to see, the women are going to be catching up with the men as far as like the talent and the skill depth.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like that already happened years ago, when you started seeing people like Amanda Nunes
Yeah.
just start dominating, right? Ronda Rousey set the scene for what women's MMA can be, and how dominant a woman can be in MMA. Then Amanda Nunes showed like, okay, let me show you what I can do.
Yeah.
And then for women's MMA, I mean, you had like Holly Holm and Jessica Pena and a bunch of other women. Like right now, there's so many. Alexa Grasso, who is such a spitfire, right? She comes back, she loses a fight, and she comes back 10 times stronger somehow. But it's amazing. Like, that's what you want to see, where somebody who took it seriously learned from it, and kind of moved on. And it's gotten to the point where the women's fights are way more exciting, because you don't have that mental barrier that some men do, like, oh, I don't want to get embarrassed. But these girls are like, I don't like the way she looked at me, so I'm just gonna go right at her. All right. Zhang Weili and Rose Namajunas, like, those fights were incredible. And like, I will always watch them fight, because they're just such great fights. So I think in a lot of ways, women's MMA, in terms of skill and viewership, is more exciting than some of the men's fights can be.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think you see, like you said, women's fights, they tend to let it hang out there a little more. Like they're willing to put more on the line, almost, just to not be safe.
Oh yeah, it's I'll tell you right now, if you look up the 10 most boring fights in the UFC, not a single one was a women's fight.
No.
Right? It's always these guys just playing it way too safe, throwing 30 punches in a 5-round fight. But these women go after it, and it's just way more exciting. And the emotion coming from these women, it's raw, and it's real, and it's something that we need in the sport, to show people that, hey, this is how fighting can be, and this is how exciting it should be. I've seen your fights. You were scrappy, right? You took a punch and you're like, no, I don't like that. And then you went right after it as well. And even against Glory Watson, she is, like you said, she is very talented, and you went right after her, right? And she took you down one of the times, and then you got right back up, and so you were playing to your strengths, which you looked physically stronger than her. It looked like you were able to pick her up if you truly wanted to. So I think, do you power lift? Do you do so? I mean, or is it just your jujitsu base? Because there were times where it felt like, I don't want to burn my energy, but I can slam her if I want to.
Yeah, I coming out of a striking background, I was always a striker. And grappling in the last 7 years has been, I've kind of put everything into grappling, because I felt like I had to play catch up with it. So wrestling and jiu-jitsu have become a big part of my training, just to try to like I said, play catch up with it. I think, my build, my frame, I'm a stocky, shorter build. I grew up on a farm, so, when you grow up on a farm, you carry a lot of heavy things, you're lifting a lot of heavy things, and I think it does, nice peasant stock. It makes you nice and strong. So no, I do think I usually have a little bit of a strength advantage when it comes to clinch exchanges. And I've been trying to embrace mixing it up because it's not just striking, it's not just wrestling, it's not just jujitsu. Blending things for me was always a struggle, because I was like, oh, I'm doing this, oh, we're doing this, we're striking, no, we're grappling. But for me, that's been my big focus in the last couple of years is to blend my fighting, just to be a little more unpredictable, so that I'm not just striking and not just grappling. And yeah, that's been my big philosophy these past couple of years. And yeah, I need to use my physicality a little bit more. I'm decently strong. I don't power lift, but I do weight train. And
Sure.
I can lift some pretty heavy things. So
So this question's kind of a two-part question. One, is there any fight that you have when you think back on, like, man, I played that one really wrong, right? She was a jiu-jitsu player, and I tried to wrestle around with her on the ground when I should have kept it on the feet. Why did I do that? And then if you took a loss with that, one, how do you break your mentality on, like, how can I have that back and how can I learn from it? Because for some people, they lose all of their confidence after a loss and they can't even find themselves in the gym. So I want to help people that may have taken a loss and don't know how to figure out how to get past that.
yeah, so in a couple of the fights I've lost, and especially like recent losses, I've come to terms with, it's so easy in a fight to get caught up in it, and you really do just want to impose your will and just get in there and get your hands on. Patience for me is something I've been working on, because it's so important not to make. I mean, you have to make split-second decisions throughout the entire fight. Don't get me wrong, but it's so important to make decisions with a plan, or with a path for where you want to go, and not just react. And so for me, that's been something big, because yeah, several fights now, I probably had the striking advantage, and I rushed grappling where it didn't need to take place, where it didn't need to happen. And so moving forward from that, as far as confidence goes, you just it's a mental decision. I think I have confidence in my skills because of the years I've put into this. On average, I train 3 to 4 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. So you have to have confidence in what you put in and the time you put in, and you have to have faith that what you're doing means something. And I do. I have all the skills. I have all the talent. It is at a certain point, it's about discipline, having patience, having enough control, self-control mentally to make the right decisions at the right times. And that's what makes good fighters. I mean, we see that all the time with fighting. It's not necessarily the most athletic or talented person that wins. It's a person that has high fight IQ, that can make good decisions in the right split-second exchanges, that makes a difference. And so I think that's the big thing for people that, take a loss off of, just making bad choices, is you have to get your mind, you have to do some mental training, honestly, and get your mind right, and get some self-control and some discipline and patience.
Are you doing anything to prep for this upcoming fight, or are you just doing the same thing, business as usual?
My fight camps are usually business as usual, high volume stuff, all that the same. Something I've kind of, like I said, I've really focused on this time is not reacting with impulsive movements. Making a decision about, well, why am I doing this? Why am I clinching? Do I want to be in this clinch? Okay, I don't want to be here, then get out. Just making the right decisions in the right moment. And so this camp has been very focused on being deliberate with where I'm going in a fight and exchanges. So that part is different. And I'm working on some mental stuff too. My last fight was a little rough. My dad passed away a week after my last fight, and oddly enough, my fight was in Columbus, and my dad was in Columbus in a hospital about 5 miles away, dying. And it was a rough weekend, because we all knew, like, he was dying, And I remember like being right before the fight and being like, this doesn't, I didn't have like my normal, like, oh, like happy glow before a fight, because I was kind of like, yeah, why am I here? My dad's dying in a hospital 5 miles from here. Why am I at a fight, fighting? And that was rough. And I think that goes partly, I've really been working on the mental side of things, because even though life circumstances can throw you for a loop like that, I think it's really important to have control over your mind and be able to take yourself the state that you need to be in for a fight. Because that's a hard learned lesson from that last fight. Is my mind was not where it normally is before a fight. I wasn't in my fight headspace, and it definitely can mess with you a little bit. So I think I have focused a lot on just some mental exercises, just trying to like work on taking control of your mind.
Yeah, that mental fortitude. Talking to other fighters, it's funny because they'll have, not funny, but they'll have similar stories where like something happens in their life.
Yeah.
And it's like a common theme, like, and then they'll maybe lose that fight because of something that's happened.
Yeah.
But it always at the other end of it, they always come out better because it makes them get tougher mentally, and just be more prepared for when something else comes their way. Like they're just a little bit more prepared for it. They know how to shut that off in their mind and kind of work through it. So, I mean, at least something came out of it in terms of your fight game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely, and that's the thing with every fight. Good, bad, ugly. Maybe you did amazing. There's always things to take out of fights. There's always stuff to learn from and move forward from.
Yeah, sometimes the best thing that can happen is taking a loss, so that way you can learn from it and realize that you're not untouchable and you didn't die.
Yeah.
So you're still kind of moving on.
Yeah.
What for people that are less experienced, what things do you do or recommend to help people with their mental fortitude? Like, did you use self-help books or speak to therapists? Or what did you do to help increase? Because, you weren't 18 years old with the amount of mental fortitude that you have now. It comes through stages. So like, what kind of advice would you give to someone that, 16, 17, 18-year-old girl that's fighting right now, that's going to listen to this podcast, that may not have that experience as of yet?
Yeah. So, I think there's a couple things people can do, and maybe I have a little bit of an unfair advantage with this a little bit. My master's degree is in clinical mental health counseling. So, I pull on a few tricks from that kind of stuff. Self-help books are awesome. People knock that all the time. And I'm like, hey, don't knock it. Everybody has a little bit of a different learning style or approach to any type of thing like this. Some people really like like affirmations, which I know people laugh at that too. But that little mental voice inside your head that you talk to yourself with, that's important, and it does a lot to what's going on physically, emotionally. And so I think that's a big thing, to get control of that inner voice, because some people really don't have good control over that, and there's a lot of like negative self-talk. Which then leads to doubt, and just, it affects everything. It affects your entire system, physically, emotionally, mentally. So I think that's a big thing for people looking to get into, how to kind of zero in on what's going on in their brain. But yeah, I think self-help books are great. I think affirmation stuff is great. But as far as fighting specific, I do think you have to practice this in conjunction with training. Like, you can do this in the morning as you do your yoga and have your breaths and your coffee, and you're taking your, 10 count in and out deep breaths, and that's great. But then when you go and spar, if that all goes out the window and you're, oh my gosh, why I'm an idiot? Why did I take that bad shot? That stuff, you can't do that. So there has to be, you have to join that stuff together, where you're actually exercising your mental capacity in your training, because the two have to go together. But yeah, I think there's quite a few different tools that people can use to help that.
Yeah, that's huge, because especially as a young fighter, you feel that either you're invincible or you're not, and then it's a make or break for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize that over time, even just in daily life things, you're going to experience losses and rejection and things like that, and you just have to have the ability to bounce back. And we see that a lot with some fighters. They some of them either bounce back really well, some of them never bounce back, and they might have had all the talent in the world, but that confidence killed their hard work, and that hard work, it's out the window. And we see that a lot in the with a lot of pro fighters. Granted, some of them lose at some of like the biggest stages they've ever had, and that might just completely shatter their confidence to where they can never get it back again. But other people shine. I've always said pressure either makes diamonds, turns coal into diamonds, or it breaks pipes. Pressure forms diamonds or breaks pipes, and we won't know until we see the heart. Right? There's a reason why people have, that dog in them that lets them come back. That scrappiness, So hopefully we see some of that on May 13th when when you're up there, because it's I feel like that's going to be a good fight because both you and your opponent definitely want to erase some of the history there. I know that, and both of you are hungry for it. So, since you've seen, her, you're somewhat friends with her. How do you figure that fight is going to go?
That's a tricky one because I think Tabitha's really well rounded. Obviously, she really has embraced grappling. I think jujitsu probably is like her, her thing. But honestly, she's really well rounded. She's got good striking. And, I think her, she can get to where she wants to get with things. I think it's going to be a scrap. I think it's going to be, and I hesitate to say like where it will take place because I can see it, being a bit of a stand up battle, and I could see it easily going to the ground. So I really hesitate to say where it will take place or what it will look like. But I really do think this is going to be a tough fight, and I think it's going to be a nice scrap. Like I really do think this is going to be a fun fight, like a back and forth battle, and I really hope for it because those are the fights that just are the funnest fights to look back on, are the ones where you're like,
Yeah.
that was just all the rounds of fun. I don't know. I love that. Those are my favorite fights I've ever had, are fights where you just get to go to war. And at the end of it, you're just like, I don't know if I won or not, but that was good.
I know she usually fights at atom weight, right? I mean, did she moved up for this fight? Do you think that's going to have any effect on the outcome?
Yeah, I honestly don't think it should change too much. I think Tabitha's probably pretty similar in size to myself. I think atom weight is a tough cut for people that are anywhere, in the 125 range, walking around weight around 125, which tends to be a lot of atom weights, and that's a tough cut. And I think probably maybe she got sick of that drastic cut because it does take a toll on you. And so honestly, as far as size or physicality, I wouldn't expect it to be too much different because, ultimately you're getting in the cage there the next night about the same size usually anyways. You know what I mean? So I don't think that'll probably change too much for her. I mean, maybe she'll have a better performances or better, feel better in the fight than maybe making the cut to atom weight, because I know when I've cut to atom weight, but right around the third round, your gas tank, it doesn't feel the same because you had a hard weight cut. So I think it makes for better fights and better performances when people do not cut as much weight.
Yeah. Are there any like women fighters you look up to right now? Are there any girls you got your eye on?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, there's such a gang of killers emerging on the female MMA scene right now. There's so many girls that are just really put it together. Invicta's got a whole batch of straw weights right now that I'm like, oh my gosh, like these girls are, it's fun to kind of look at the matchups that Invicta's making right now because they've got a really nice stable of straw weights right now. And as far as like looking up to, oh my gosh, I mean, there's so many women that have put their stamp on the sport already that it would be hard to even go through them. But I know that just recently, like some UFC standouts that I've really just been like, oh my gosh, like that girl's put it together. Erin Blanchfield, watching her fights these last few, like I'm like, oh my gosh, that she's so young and has like her potential, like her threshold for where she can go from here is it's impressive. And I know just recently that's one that stuck out at me like as a name that I was like, oh my gosh, like that girl's got it together.
She's 23.
I know.
She is 23.
Yeah.
That's it's she's a whole different animal. I mean, she just beat Jessica Andrade.
Yeah.
So right, and she's beat some names, JJ Aldridge and whatnot. So that's I think she's definitely, she's fighting 2 to 3 times a year as well.
Yeah.
So she just fought in February, and it looks like she might be fighting again here in the next couple of months. So hopefully, yeah, that's a big one. Who was your favorite fighter as you were training? Once you figured out that the UFC was a thing, who did you follow?
So right off the rip, after my first MMA fight, I kind of found out what the UFC was and whatever. And right during that time frame, it was George St. Pierre was, the champ, and I remember just thinking like, okay, that guy has a cool style. Like I loved watching him fight.
Oh my god!
So he was always like one I was like, oh yeah, So yeah, I'd have to say originally George St. Pierre was.
Georgia St. GSP had, for some reason, powerlifting strength, and he wasn't a powerlifter. He was just naturally strong.
Yeah.
He was just body slamming people for the sake of slamming them. He was a fun guy to watch. He was absolutely a fun guy to watch. Did you try to emulate his style in terms of like?
No, I knew that I didn't have that capacity, especially at that time frame. I knew that I wasn't there, but it didn't stop me from loving watching him fight.
Fair enough.
Is there anyone you'd like to fight in the upcoming year or two?
No one in particular, no names. I'm just hoping to stay fairly active. I'd love to, I was able to stay fairly active since, I was able to get that fight in early 22. But yeah, I would like to fight, 3 times a year would be ideal, 3-4 times a year. And so I'm hoping that I can just stay fairly active, iron out my wrinkles and just get more cage time, and just, see where it takes me.
Yeah, getting tape on yourself is just as important as getting tape on the other opponent.
Yes.
So
yes.
Awesome. That I don't feel like I have any more questions for.
Yeah. Is there any sponsors or your Instagram or your Facebook or just all your social medias you want to shout out?
Yeah. So Instagram, it's Alibeth Milliron. Pretty simple. And I gotta say sponsors, I gotta shout out my chiropractor, Breath of Life Chiropractic. Been taking care of my spine now for the last 7 years. And I gotta tell you, when you beat yourself up in the gym every day, it's good to have good preventative health care behind you. I get massage and all that stuff regularly too. Shout out to my sister for that. She's an awesome massage therapist. Also works with me at my massage spot. Milliron Construction, of course, is my number one sponsor. It's the family construction business, and they, of course, sponsor most of my fight camps. And I gotta shout out my gyms. My main MMA gym, Ludus MMA, Tom Capaldi. Just oh my gosh, as any of you guys know, any gym coach spends so much time, so many hours, and that's the toughest part about failing at all in any sport is when you see all the time they put into you, and if you can't return that with success, it always feels the worst. But I gotta shout out him, and then also my jiu-jitsu coach, my jiu-jitsu gym, Terry Shaner, Team Pedro Sauer, Petoskey MMA. Just the same thing for just really spending tons of time just honing out my weaknesses and just making sure that my grappling is better than it ever was.
Awesome. So everyone come see Allie take on Tabitha Watkins May 13th, Lansing, Michigan, TWC 101.5. Yeah, I mean, that's it for me. Brandon, got anything else?
It was a pleasure having you on, Alibeth. And we will be. I'm very excited to watch your fight on May 13th.
Yeah.
So,
thank you guys.
Awesome.
No problem.